Thanks everybody for attending the webinar. This is part of research that's been done last year with some of our collaboration with one of our partners, which is Finning, which is a UK Caterpillar dealer. And here we looked at the measurement of customer loyalty. Every big organization looking at ways to how they can assess and predict their customer loyalty based on the services or the product that they offer to them. And that work specifically, or that presentation specifically, we're going to discuss a little bit what are the current customer loyalty measurements. It's been discussed in the literature, it's been used by different organizations as well. And we're going to tap into what are the critiques that these literatures was talking about, why NPS is not a good measurement or is not an enough measurement basically to be used to predict and analyze a customer loyalty. Then we're going to come up with a proposed framework, how to use the big data or the data analytics in general to predict and assess this customer loyalty. We'll tap into the findings and the contribution of this research. So if we're going to start by what are the current customer loyalty measurements the organizations or the literatures are discussing. So normally organization looking at one single question, which is they ask normally their customers, are you satisfied, for example, from our service or our products, and they rate them from scale 1 to 10, for example. And this is, for example, the customer satisfaction metrics, which is general satisfaction about our brand or our product and service. It could be the famous one or the most famous one, which is a Net Promoter Score, which is really asking the questions: how likely you as a customers could refer us to another colleague. And here you're looking at the percentage of promoters against the percentage of detractors. The last measurements has been discussed as well in the literature, especially in Harvard Business Review, which is a customer effort score. So the customer effort score is looking to that questions about how seamless is the service, or how seamless is the customer experience with a specific type of organization. And how easy it is. This is the scale from 1 to 10 basically, and how delightful you are to your customers. The problem about all these measurements, it's been taken as a traditional measurements in our marketing and customer experience inside team to be used to measure our customer experience and loyalty in that specific. All of them claim this is the metrics that every manager should follow to measure and monitor the customer loyalty. When we look to the literature, as part of our research profiles, so we looked at the literature and we looked at what we mean about customer loyalty in general. So we looked at one of the common definitions that mostly organizations follow, and also the literatures attract to it, which is a buyer's overall attachment or deep commitment to a specific brand or organization. And here we look to different literature streams. We look to the performance measurement stream, we look to the marketing stream, we look to the big data streams, and we see what up there that discussing the metrics is that we should look to analyze our customer loyalty. And you've got to what we came out from this literature is two things. One is how differently they look to the measurement, and also what are the critiques about the current metrics that is being used by organization. But one of the things is that we looked, there is two ways to measure the customer loyalty. One is behavioral, so looking to your transactional data, and looking to the profitability and the repurchasing frequency, monetary expenditures, and etc. And also the second level, which is what normally organizations follow, is actually the attitudinal type, which is asking the opinion of the customers and telling them, rate them, their brands or service from 1 to 10 basically, or using the NPS or the customer satisfaction rates. And overall, it's part of our marketing and customer experience insights, and it's quite complex. It's not that easy to measure. But also the literature highlighted a couple of things, which is the critiques about these attitudinal measures normally when assess their customer loyalty. First of all, there is a lot of literature discuss that there is no empirical evidence that attitudinal metrics could correlate with actually the revenue of the organization or the industry. And also, secondly, it's not enough to rely on one single metric alone to predict our customer loyalty. And sometimes it doesn't give a lot of details to companies or managers how to do some actions basically on this. The third one is actually, recommendation alone is not enough to allow us to grow and get more revenue and business success. It's not a sufficient approach. And if it is the case, why some of our customers are leaving us and we lose a percentage of profitability from these customers? Normally as well, there is doesn't give a lot of what we call it a prescription for firms to give them why the customer is really not happy. So this is a general. I thought it would be beneficial for the people attending the webinar today to take a different perspectives from the academic world. How they see the customer normal metrics that are currently being implemented by organizations, especially the NPS score. Our proposed framework here, so we looked, okay, so what we're going to do is actually we try to reach the gap, right? So the gap here is actually not measuring the attitudinal data alone or the behavioral data alone. Actually, we should combine them. And actually, we try to understand the whole profile of the customer view from transactionals, from the behavioral aspects, which is a transaction normally comes from the profitability of the organization itself. And the second thing, actually, when from the attitudinal data and you're asking him the question, we combine that with the demographic data as well, which is the regional aspects. Where are our customers basically, and there is any differences in that area. Normally in the data analytics, once you need to predict, you need some predictive variables. You need some inputs basically for your output. And here we use some techniques like REM analysis, clustering, and also text mining. And I'm going to show that in a minute. And we used a classifier model by neural network and Bayesian networks to predict the customer loyalty basically was our case. And at the end, we did some validation and evaluation as well. I'm going to go that into detail. So our case, like I explained earlier, it was Finning case study, which is one of the Caterpillar dealers. Normally, when you're doing any big data projects, you try to understand what are the current practices and how the organization are really measuring the customer loyalty. So Finning in that case using the Net Promoter Score, the standalone metrics, and not combining this with behavioral data. So use attitudinal data as a base, basically, to evaluate whether the customer is loyal or is not loyal. The current process is really typical like any other organizations, which is basically follow survey being pushed to specific sample of customers, responses being recorded, and there is some analysis on a monthly basis, basically, and it's been done a little bit manually. There are some issues in that we are identifying. It's normally a random 2% of the customers are surveyed. Also, it's not for the strategic decision making. There are a separate way to do that, and there is no linkage to customer spending patterns, like I explained earlier. But this is not the case. It's just to understand the practice, the current practice, and how we can help basically the organization to see different approach that could help them to assess the customer loyalty and the process in general. In terms of the data understanding, so we had the privilege to access a good data set from Finning. So one part, as we explained in the framework, is the attitudinal data, which is represented by the NPS rating and also the qualitative free text that the customers express his opinion freely on this. Then the second sources of data was the transactional data, which was a financial type of data that the customers actually ask for a service or sales or product support or under customer service agreements. And the sales here, we looking at new products or used or leased transaction types, combining the service part, which is a part, and the service transaction type, if that makes sense. The last one is the demographic data, which is basically the different regional area that actually Caterpillar is delivering to their customers. When you do we started to develop some analysis in the behavioral data at the first place. So we looked to some techniques, which is one of them is called the RFM analysis, and the RFM is a short letters for recency, frequency, monetary kind of analytics. And here you're looking to how recent your customer are, how frequent your customer buying from you, and the monetary value as well. And here we use it with this transactional data to understand how customer is profitable to Finning in that case. And then we group these customers using some clustering techniques, which is K-means in that case, mimicking the NPS scores, which is 1 to 11, and to understand how the customers is really, promoter or detractors or passive, basically, because basically based on his contribution to buy from the customers either a service or a product, now we can understand whether he's loyal or not loyal. That specifically for that analysis with the PS transaction, this approach. And here's an example. So you can see that table, which is show the different analysis of different customers here. If you consider, for example, the last customer, which is 4478. So this customer recently bought from Finning 11 days ago. He's a frequent buyer because he bought 97 times. And he contributed to buy or commit to buy from Finning by 71,000, basically. So that is actually has high scores in different metrics here, which is recency, frequency, and monetary. Give you 445, which is really his score, basically. Compared to, for example, to the customer 1992, which is not buying recently from Finning. So the last time he bought from 174 days, bought 4 times from them. And actually the monetary is quite low, which is 2.2. That's why I give us lowest score here in the RFM, which is 111, which is really looks like a detractor. So when you look to all these data, you can actually use the clustering to understand the profile of our customers here. So the customers that give us RFM score quite high, we can consider them promoter because they're still buying from our organizations based on the behavioral data. There is others that are as well passive, and there is other detractors based on the behavioral data. And here we mimic the NPS score based on the 0 to 10 here. When we do this and compare the behavioral, just to compare the behavioral data compared to the NPS scores, which is the attitudinal, so the definition now is different, right? Because basically, if the customer is still committed to buy, based on the definition I explained earlier, he's committed to a brand or a product or service, that means he should be a frequent and a recent and contribute to quite good money. Compared to just give me a score of NPS, which is 10 out of 10 or 9 out of 10. But then now give us this kind of analysis, which is there's a lot of misclassification here. So for people, based on the misclassified NPS, from promoter to detractors, we have over the years the increasing number of people of customers who's actually misclassified as a loyal customer, let's say that way. And also from the different category, we did a compare between the promoter to detractors, the passive to detractor, promoter to passive, and the other way around. So the positive and negative ones as well. And here you can see at the outcome, the number of customers misclassification over the year are increasing, from 72 to 82. We came as well as part of the parameters that we want to put in our prediction model here is actually what we mean about active customers, because basically we would like to understand whether when we consider the customer is active with us or where he's not an active. So we came up with a matrix here to understand the difference of the recency perspective when the customer buys from us. And here we looked at the date of the latest transaction compared to the date of second latest transactions to compare to come up with this active customer definition. And in Finning or Caterpillar wallet, they should consider if the customer is not active by 71 days, or not buying from you within 71 days, that means looks like he might be a churner or he's not active. Let's say that way. Let's not go to more a positive or bold statement that he's a churner, but let's say he's not active with you. That might need more communications and talk to them. That put us into that kind of matrix, which is actually 54% actually only loyal, and 46% might be a churner or inactive in general, if we talked about the active customers. Then partly as well, some of the work we did with text mining, which is looking to now the attitudinal data. So, and here is actually, sometimes customers give you 10 out of 10, but still in the additional comments, they complain, right? And we have to deal with this additional comment or the text mining part, because basically that could overlay between what is really the customer opinion compared to his rate and do some comparisons here. But we did more than this, so I'm not going to go into details of how we did the text mining. But we built some text mining model to classify each sentence level and build some root cause analysis. But here, not the case for the customer loyalty, because here all has to be structured data. So what we did something is called comment score. And basically, we calculate the customer average across all the survey entries, and we bin this into 3 type or a complaint status. So the customers could be classified into a complainer or a neutral or a satisfied kind of customers. What we found interesting is 63% of the customers in our data set was complainer, compared to 22% satisfied, based only on the opinion data or the additional comments kind of record. If you put all these together and build a kind of neural network model, and we use neural metric and Bayesian network, which is allow us to predict around 94% correctly whether this customer is loyal or not. And the way we did normally is we try to train the data 60%, and then we test it with 30% of the data, and we do validations by the 10%. So it looks like consistent kind of accuracy over the different stages of the data sets. It's going lower sometimes because of the introductions of the new data. But the highlight here, what we said is actually, if you look only to the perceived NPS, so just look to the scores of the NPS scores, you can tell that actually the customers of Finning is 70% promoter and 5% detractor and 25% passive, just to look to NPS score and rely on it. But if you look to what we did in terms of the actual behavior, you can, because basically on the transactional data, actually it's a different image here, also different pictures, which is actually tell us that there is inactive customers around 46%, and only our loyal customers is 54%. So here is a contrast. So when you compare only the NPS scores with the purchase span over the 3 years, there is a different picture here. So how can we rely on this, basically? What we did as well, we looked at, that's the final kind of, we did a lot of analysis on this just to fit the purpose of our collaboration with Finning. But one of the things that we looked at is actually identify the top 20 loyal customers that we think that they have a problem or inactive, basically. And you can see this by the full analysis. You can have some, let's say, a small dashboard that tell you the customers, the monetary value he normally contributes, and the complainer status. When you combine this, he's a complainer and complain about specific things, and then the root cause that he's complaining about. In conclusion, this is basically part of the work that I wanted to say today, is that the highlight here is actually, this is part of the unreliability of NPS as being to be used as a single loyalty measure with B2B commerce organization. Looks like we're missing something here. The second thing is the integrations between the demographic, behavior, and attitude that could give us better accessibility of our customer loyalty. It looks like big data could allow us to understand things better than the normal scores or the normal measurements, because basically it's highlight different data sources, which is give us different picture, basically. I'm not saying this should, I'm not saying is we should take NPS out of the equations, but what we're trying to say is actually consider NPS and other data sources as well when you are dealing with your customer. You're already sitting on a lot of data that you have in your organization, either transactional or attitudinal. We might consider as well social media as another type of data. You could have this 360 view of your customers to understand whether really your customer is loyal or not. That's really important. And really the big data and the approach we used here is successfully assessed by 94%, which is quite good accuracy compared to other literature as well. The last thing I want to say here as well is actually the role of the text mining is quite important as well, just to understand really the opinion freely of the customers, right? And when you do that manually, sometimes you're not capturing all the details, but when you have a full automated model, and that could portray a different picture for you. And emotion here is really important as well. Thank you, that's what I want to say.